I feel very fortunate. I've been blessed by God in my life. First of all, to have great parents. Couldn't have had a better role model than my father. And then to have a lot of opportunities that have come my way to work with great people and to have people that I had the opportunity to work for, such as Ronald Reagan and some of the others that I had a chance to work under their leadership over the course of the years. While I was in the Army, because I'd had 1 year of law school, I got all of the so-called legal assignments in this artillery battalion as extra duty. So one day I'd be training recruits. Another day I was a prosecutor, a trial counsel, as they called it. And so I had quite a bit of experience with that. And then later on I was a member of the court-martial board as a battery commander. And so I enjoyed this legal work, and particularly the trial work, and that persuaded me to go back to law school after I got out. And so that's really what led me eventually to the district attorney's office, where I did a lot of trial work. Ronald Reagan was always a great student. And even as governor, I remember talking with him and him talking about ideas of how we ought to beat the communists, so to speak. And so he brought those ideas into the presidency, but also brought in with him people who would carry out this idea that communists were not unbeatable. As a matter of fact, even before the election, Dick Allen asked him during the campaign, "Mr. President, how are you going to deal with the communists?" And the president said, "Dick, it's simple. We win, they lose." Now, this was not a braggadocio type of statement, but he actually felt that with the right strategies, with the right actions, with the right policies, the communists could be beaten, because he felt that the totalitarian ideas that were the foundation of communism were a means of their own destruction, and that people could not be oppressed and held captive for long periods of time, that the sense of and the desire for freedom would ultimately overcome the totalitarians.
President Reagan never mentioned the term originalism, but he clearly had something like that in mind. How would you describe his vision of the role of a judge? What is your vision of the role of a judge?
Well, I think President Reagan and I both had the same ideas along these lines, and it really started with him when he was governor of California, because too often federal judges would go beyond their role of interpreting the law and would carry out, remember, these were the days in the 60s, the Warren Court on the one hand. It was also the days of the so-called Great Society of President Johnson. And then, quite frankly, it was the era of Nixon, which there was no attempt to really dismantle the so-called Great Society, which was failing even at that time, and obviously failing. And the judges appointed by liberal, or let's say anti-constitutional presidents, or presidents who didn't care about the Constitution, really. I don't think they were really anti-Constitution as much as they ignored it. But in any event, so Ronald Reagan, as governor, experienced federal judges undoing the things he was trying to do in welfare reform and various other ways in California. And so the role of a judge, and he was an expert on the founding. He knew more history than probably any president who's ever sat in the White House. But he understood the founders, and he understood how the founders' vision of the court was being manipulated, was being perverted in many ways by subsequent presidents in their appointments. So this idea of originalism, that is the concept that the Constitution ought to be interpreted, and laws and statutes ought to be interpreted as they actually read, was a concept that he had coming into the presidency. And now he talked about it in slightly different terms. He talked about it in terms of judicial restraint. And the best compilation of his views were probably contained in the speech that he gave at the installation of Chief Justice Rehnquist and Justice Scalia in 1986, when he talked about, he said Hamilton and Jefferson opposed each other to a great extent back in the founding period, but he said the one thing they agreed on, along with their colleagues, was the concept of judicial restraint, which was really originalism, just expressed in different views. I think one of the most important things for young people is to read the different leaders, Hayek and von Mises and others like that, Russell Kirk, and also, quite frankly, some of the works of Bill Buckley and some of the articles in National Review, which today are really exceptional as an analysis of current issues, so that it's not just a matter of making decisions on particular current issues, but understand the background and the basic philosophical foundation of conservatism in this country, which has been the basis for success of this nation over more than 250 years.